Jax's revenge domain. 28 years on factory floors teaches you one thing. Machinery doesn't lie, metrics don't negotiate, and respect flows upstream when downstream depends on you. Some people think volume overrides physics. They learn expensive lessons. I'm Roland Hayes, 54 years old, and I've optimized production lines from Detroit to Tennessee. When Preston Whitfield pointed at the exit and told me I was fired, he thought he was removing an obstacle. He was actually pulling the pin on a $45 million grenade, but it would take 3 weeks for everyone to realize it. Let me tell you how this whole mess started. Tuesday morning, 7:15 a.m., Line 7 was humming at 847 units per hour. That's sweet music to a manufacturing guy like me. Optimal throughput for that configuration is 850, with quality control parameters holding steady at 99.2% first pass yield. I was reviewing cycle time data when Preston walked up with his clipboard and that look young managers get when they think spreadsheets solve physics. "Roland, we need to bump this line to 1,000 units per hour by Thursday," he said, not asking, telling big presentation for Midwest Automotive. Dad wants impressive numbers they can't ignore. I adjusted my safety glasses and looked at him over my coffee. Preston was 32, fresh from some business school, carrying his father's last name like it was body armor. Charles Whitfield, the VP Manufacturing, had hired me 6 months ago to implement lean processes across their Michigan plant. The kid had been watching my work like I was stealing company secrets instead of saving them money every day. Throughput analysis shows maximum sustainable rate at current configuration is 875 units, I said, keeping my voice level. Push beyond that, quality degrades exponentially. Statistical process control doesn't bend for presentations, Preston. His jaw tightened up like someone had cranked a wrench on it. Around us, the production floor hummed at its engineered rhythm. Line workers knew their jobs, supervisors knew their metrics. Everyone knew the rules except the guy with the MBA who thought rules were suggestions for little people. "This is exactly the old school thinking that's holding us back," Preston said, loud enough for Diana Foster, the floor supervisor, to look over from her station. "We're trying to compete globally here, and you're stuck in some 1990s mindset about limitations." I kept my tone steady, the way you do when explaining basic physics to someone who thinks enthusiasm beats engineering. Physics hasn't changed since the 1990s, son. Neither has metallurgy. You want 1,000 units per hour. We need equipment upgrades, workforce training, and supply chain recalibration. That's a 6-month project, not a Thursday deadline. But the kid wasn't listening anymore. He was performing for the handful of workers within earshot, trying to prove something to himself about authority and modern thinking. That's always where these things go sideways fast. "You know what?" Preston said, his voice carrying across the production bay like he wanted the whole shift to hear. "I think we need some fresh perspectives on this team. Someone who understands that efficiency means results, not excuses." Miguel Santos, the union rep, stopped his conversation with Alan Porter, the maintenance chief. Diana Foster put down her tablet and turned to watch. Jennifer Crawford looked up from her quality control station. The line kept running, but attention shifted the way it does when management raises voices, because everyone's paycheck depends on keeping things stable. I closed my clipboard and looked directly at Preston. "You're firing me." "That's exactly what I'm doing," he said louder now, making sure everyone within 50 feet heard him loud and clear. "HR will process your final paperwork. Thanks for your time, but we need people who can deliver results instead of roadblocks." I nodded once and started walking toward the exit. Behind me, conversations resumed slowly, the way they do when people aren't sure what they just witnessed. Preston probably thought he looked decisive. Strong leadership, results-oriented thinking that would impress his father. He didn't realize he just terminated the only person in that building who understood their entire supply chain architecture. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in my pickup truck in the parking lot, looking at my phone, 3 missed calls already. The first from Jennifer Crawford in quality control, the second from Alan Porter in maintenance, the third from a number I didn't recognize but figured was probably Diana Foster calling from the floor supervisor's line. I didn't answer any of them, not yet. Instead, I drove across town to Murphy's Diner and ordered coffee. Black, no sugar, the way I've been drinking it since my Army days. Through the window, I could see the Whitfield Industries sign in the distance. That big blue logo they were so proud of. From here, everything looked normal. Trucks moving in and out, shift changes happening on schedule, the kind of industrial rhythm that looks permanent until someone breaks it without understanding what they're breaking. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer, line 7, already showing quality variance after speed increase attempt. What should I do? I finished half my coffee before responding. Follow standard operating procedures. I'm no longer authorized to provide guidance on company operations. The second text came from Miguel 5 minutes later. Preston's pushing immediate speed increase. Unions getting concerned about safety protocols being bypassed. My response was simple. Direct all safety questions to management. My contract with Whitfield Industries has been terminated. By 3 p.m. that afternoon, my phone had stopped buzzing. Word travels fast in manufacturing plants. When a consultant gets fired publicly in front of half the day shift, everyone knows about it within an hour. When that consultant was responsible for process optimization across multiple production lines, everyone also knows what's coming next, even if management doesn't. I spent the rest of that afternoon cleaning out my temporary office and boxing up documentation. Preston had made one critical error in his firing performance. He'd assumed I worked for Whitfield Industries. I didn't. I worked for Hayes Manufacturing Solutions, my own consulting firm that I'd started after leaving General Motors 8 years back. Whitfield was a client, and as of 2:30 p.m. Tuesday, they were a former client. The contract termination paperwork was straightforward. No penalties for early withdrawal, standard 48-hour notification period for discontinuation of services. Charles Whitfield would receive the official notice Wednesday morning, along with documentation of all incomplete projects and recommendations for internal staff assignments. What Charles wouldn't receive was the supplier relationship database I'd spent 6 months building, or the quality control protocols I'd developed specifically for their equipment mix, or the maintenance schedules I'd optimized for their production targets. That intellectual property belonged to Hayes Manufacturing Solutions, not Whitfield Industries. Preston hadn't just fired a consultant, he'd terminated access to systems that kept their operation running smooth. Wednesday morning brought the first ripples. Jennifer Crawford called while I was replacing spark plugs in my truck. Roland line 7's showing inconsistent cycle times. We pushed to 950 units yesterday afternoon for Preston's numbers, and now we're getting vibration alerts from the main assembly. What's the diagnostic protocol? Jennifer, you know I can't provide technical guidance anymore. Contract's terminated, I know, but the documentation you left doesn't cover this specific scenario. Equipment's behaving differently than baseline parameters. Then you need to contact the equipment manufacturer. That's standard procedure when consultant support isn't available. What I didn't tell Jennifer was that the vibration alerts were predictable. Push equipment beyond engineered tolerances, and stress patterns develop in ways that take weeks to fully manifest. The line had absorbed Tuesday's speed-up attempt, but mechanical memory doesn't forget. Those stress patterns would cascade through interconnected systems until something failed in a way that couldn't be ignored. Thursday brought Charles Whitfield's first call. I was having breakfast at Murphy's when my phone rang. Roland, I heard there was some kind of misunderstanding with Preston yesterday. He said you two had a disagreement about production targets. No misunderstanding, Charles, I said, stirring my coffee. Your son terminated my contract. Standard procedure from here. Look, Preston's young, he's eager to make an impression. Maybe he overstepped his authority. Can we work this out professionally? I looked out the window toward the Whitfield facility. From this distance, you couldn't see the stress building inside those walls, but I knew it was there. Like hairline cracks in metal that spread until structural failure becomes inevitable. Charles, I've got 28 years in this business. When someone points at the door and says you're fired in front of 50 workers, that's not overstepping. That's decision-making. I respect decisive leadership, even when it's poorly informed. Silence on the other end while Charles ran calculations, trying to figure out exactly what Preston's decisive leadership was going to cost. What would it take to get you back? New contract, better terms, whatever makes sense. Honestly, Charles, I've got other priorities now. Apex Manufacturing called yesterday. They're interested in the lean implementation program I developed. Funny how word travels in this business. Apex was Whitfield's biggest competitor in the regional automotive supply chain. Everyone knew they'd been trying to break into Midwest Automotive's vendor network for 2 years. Charles knew it too, probably better than anyone. Roland, let's not make any hasty decisions here. I'm sure we can reach an understanding that works for everyone. Nothing hasty about it. Business opportunity presented itself, professional obligation to explore it thoroughly. I hung up and went back to my eggs. The waitress topped off my coffee without being asked, the kind of service that comes from understanding what customers need without them having to explain it every time. Thursday afternoon brought the first visible cracks. Alan Porter called from maintenance. Roland, Line 7's primary drive assembly is showing bearing stress. Temperatures climbing, vibrations increased 15% since Tuesday. I need to know if this is related to the speed up Preston ordered. Alan, you know I can't provide technical analysis anymore. This isn't about consulting. This is about safety. If that bearing fails during production, we could have workers in danger. I need to know if I should red tag the line. I sat in my truck for a minute watching clouds build over the factory district. Alan Porter was a good man, 20 years in industrial maintenance, with a wife and 2 kids in high school. He was asking the right questions for the right reasons. Alan, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you what I'd do if I were responsible for worker safety. When equipment shows stress patterns after operating outside design parameters, conservative response protects people. Aggressive response protects schedules. Thanks, Roland. That's what I needed to hear. 2 hours later, Alan shut down Line 7 for emergency maintenance. Preston called him on the floor demanding immediate restart. Alan refused, citing safety protocols. Preston threatened his job. Alan called the union. By 6 p.m. Thursday, the situation had escalated beyond personalities. Miguel Santos, the union rep, had filed formal safety grievances. Peason was demanding that Alan be terminated for insubordination. Charles was trying to mediate between his son's demands and union regulations that protected workers from unsafe conditions. Meanwhile, 847 units sat in quality control holding, waiting for inspection results that would determine whether Tuesday's production push had created costly rework situations. Jennifer Crawford was running overtime shifts to process the backlog, but her team was asking questions about pressure to approve marginal units. My phone rang again around 8 p.m. Charles, sounding tired. Roland, things are getting complicated here. Unions involved, production's down, and we're behind on delivery schedules for the first time in 8 months. Preston thinks we can handle this internally, but I'm starting to have doubts. What's current efficiency across all lines? I asked. Down to 68% on Line 7, 71% on Line 3. We're projecting delivery delays for at least 3 major clients. Equipment stress from Tuesday's push? Probably. Maintenance is saying we need recalibration on multiple systems, plus the bearing replacement on Line 7. Alan's estimating 72 hours minimum downtime if parts are available. I made notes on a napkin while Charles talked. Parts availability for the bearing replacement. That's the bigger problem. Midwest Industrial is saying 4 to 6 weeks. Something about order processing delays and inventory allocation issues. Midwest Industrial had been one of my first relationship rebuilds when I started at Whitfield. Their account manager, Tom Rodriguez, had been frustrated with inconsistent orders, last-minute changes, and communication breakdowns that cost both companies money. I'd worked out a communication protocol that reduced order errors by 73% and improved delivery times by an average of 2.3 days. Tom and I had developed the kind of working relationship that made urgent requests possible and priority treatment standard. That relationship was part of the intellectual property that walked out the door with me on Tuesday. Charles, I'm starting a new consulting project Friday. Apex Manufacturing, they're implementing full lean optimization across 3 production lines. Another pause. Longer this time. Roland, what's it going to take to fix this situation? Nothing to fix. Professional relationship terminated Tuesday. Both parties moving forward with new priorities. This is about Preston, isn't it? Look, he made a mistake. He's young. He'll learn from this. I finished my coffee and signaled the waitress for the check. It's not about Preston personally. It's about business compatibility. Tuesday proved we're not a good fit. Better to recognize that early before bigger problems develop. Friday morning, I was at Apex Manufacturing by 7 a.m., meeting with Mark Harrison, their operations director. Clean facility, newer equipment management team that asked technical questions before making demands. Mark walked me through their current challenges without once mentioning what their competitors were doing or how impressed anyone needed to be with immediate results. We're running at 73% efficiency on our primary lines, Mark said, pulling up production data on his tablet, industry standards around 78%. We want to know if 85% is achievable without compromising safety or quality standards. Definitely achievable, I said, reviewing their baseline metrics. Timeline depends on current process documentation and willingness to implement changes systematically rather than dramatically. What kind of timeline for reaching 82%? 6 weeks, assuming full cooperation and proper change management protocols. Mark nodded. When can you start? Monday morning. By Monday, things at Whitfield had progressed from complicated to critical. Charles called while I was reviewing Apex's supply chain documentation. Roland, Line 7's been down since Friday afternoon. Parts delivery is now estimated at 6 to 8 weeks. Midwest Automotive is asking questions about delivery schedules, and we don't have good answers. What's baseline efficiency across all lines now? I asked. Down to 65% plant-wide. We're running overtime on lines 3 and 5 to compensate, but labor costs are spiking, and overtime production typically shows higher defect rates. I made notes while he talked. Compensating for lost capacity by overworking remaining equipment was textbook panic response. It usually made problems worse instead of better equipment stress indicators on the overtime lines. Maintenance is reporting elevated temperatures and increased vibration across multiple systems. Alan's recommending reduced speeds, but that would put us further behind on deliveries. While Charles was describing his company's deteriorating situation, I was watching Apex employees arrive for their shift. Orderly, unhurried, confident in their equipment and processes. The contrast was instructive. Charles, I hope things work out. I really do. But I'm committed to the Apex project now. Tuesday brought news that hit Whitfield's management like a freight train. Tom Rodriguez from Midwest Industrial called me directly. Roland, I heard you're not with Whitfield anymore. We've got some confusion on their parts orders, and their new contact doesn't seem to understand the priority protocols we set up. What kind of confusion, Tom? Order changes without proper documentation, rush requests, without established priority codes, payment processing delays. Looks like they're trying to wing it without the systems you put in place. Standard procedures should cover most situations. Should, but their new guys demanding immediate delivery without following authorization protocols. When we explain the process, he starts talking about emergency status and threatens to find new suppliers. I could picture the scene, Preston or someone like him, trying to solve supply chain problems with volume and authority instead of understanding established relationships and procedures. Tom, you've got other customers with better communication systems, right? Absolutely. Apex Manufacturing, for example, their orders come through clean every time. Payments process automatically. Priority requests follow established protocols, night and day difference. Sounds like you know where to allocate limited inventory when multiple customers have urgent needs. Exactly. Professional relationships get professional treatment. Wednesday afternoon, things escalated beyond operational problems into financial consequences. Charles called sounding genuinely worried for the first time. Roland, Midwest Automotive is threatening contract review. They're saying reliability concerns, delivery inconsistencies. We're at risk of losing them as a customer. How much of your business is Midwest Automotive? About 35%. $45 million over 3 years. If they walk, we're looking at significant layoffs, possible plant closure. I set down my coffee and looked across the street at Apex, where second shift was arriving on schedule to operate equipment that ran reliably because it was maintained properly and operated within design parameters. That would affect a lot of families, I said. 300 jobs directly, maybe more when you count suppliers and local businesses that depend on our payroll. For the first time since Tuesday, I felt something that wasn't professional detachment. Those 300 jobs belonged to people like Alan Porter, Diana Foster, Miguel Santos. Good people who showed up every day, did their work properly, and deserved better leadership than they were getting. Charles, what's Preston's role in all this? He's been reassigned. Quietly, moved to strategic planning, away from operations. No public announcement, just internal reorganization. Probably for the best. Would you consider coming back? New contract, full authority over operations, whatever terms make sense. I know we messed this up, but we need help. I watched an Apex delivery truck pull into their loading dock. On time, proper documentation, systematic unloading. The kind of reliability that builds relationships instead of breaking them. Charles, I appreciate the offer, but I'm committed to Apex now. They've got growth potential, solid management team, realistic expectations about what optimization requires. Better fit for what I do. I understand. Can't blame a man for asking. Thursday morning brought the news I'd been expecting but hoping wouldn't come. Midwest Automotive canceled their contract. Charles called me at 8 a.m., his voice hollow. "Roland, it's over. Midwest pulled the plug. They're citing reliability concerns, delivery delays, quality inconsistencies. 3 years, $45 million, gone." I set down my coffee mug and looked out at the Apex parking lot, where workers were arriving for first shift. Normal people with families, mortgages, kids in school. Just like the people at Whitfield who were about to lose their jobs. "They're moving their business to Apex," Charles continued, effective immediately. Apparently, Apex demonstrated superior operational efficiency and supply chain reliability in their proposal. "Charles, I'm sorry to hear that. I really am. 300 jobs, Roland, maybe more. We're announcing layoffs Friday. Plant closures looking inevitable unless we find new contracts fast, and our reputation in the industry is shot." I thought about Diana Foster, who'd been supervising that floor for 12 years. About Alan Porter, with his kids in high school. About Miguel Santos, who'd spent 15 years building trust between union and management. Good people who deserved better than being casualties of Preston's ego. "What's Preston's situation now?" I asked. "He's been transferred to our corporate office in Ohio. Strategic planning role, no operational responsibilities. It's basically exile, but we couldn't afford the scandal of firing the VP's son publicly, and he'll learn from this experience." Charles was quiet for a long moment. "Honestly, I don't know. He still thinks the problem was that people weren't implementing his vision properly. Doesn't seem to understand that his vision ignored physical reality." After I hung up, I walked across the street to Apex. Mark Harrison was reviewing production reports with his supervisors, the kind of routine meeting that happens when operations run smoothly enough to focus on continuous improvement instead of crisis management. "Morning, Roland. How are those optimization plans coming? Line efficiency's up to 79% across all 3 lines. Quality metrics holding steady. We should hit 83% within 4 weeks. Outstanding. Any issues we should know about? None. Your team understands that sustainable improvement requires patience and systematic implementation. Makes my job easier when management supports proper process." Mark nodded. "We just signed a major new contract. Midwest Automotive. They're moving their business from a competitor who couldn't maintain delivery standards." "Congratulations, that's good for the whole operation." "It is. Means we'll need to add a second shift, probably hire 150 new workers. Stable growth based on proven reliability. The kind of success that builds on itself." Walking back to my truck, I thought about the difference between Whitfield and Apex. Both companies had faced the same challenge: how to increase efficiency and win new business. Whitfield had chosen shortcuts, dramatic gestures, and dominance over expertise. Apex had chosen systematic improvement, respect for physical limitations, and trust in proven processes. The results spoke for themselves. That afternoon, I called Tom Rodriguez at Midwest Industrial. "Tom, I heard Whitfield's having supply chain difficulties. That's putting it mildly. They've burned through 3 different contacts trying to expedite orders without following proper procedures. Their new guy actually threatened to sue us for not treating them as priority customers. What about other clients with urgent needs? We're prioritizing professional relationships. Apex Manufacturing gets same-day processing on rush orders because their paperwork's always complete and their payment history's perfect. Easy choice when inventory's limited. Sounds like good business practice. It is. Apex just placed a major order for expanded production. They're adding equipment to handle new contracts. Meanwhile, Whitfield's arguing about delivery times for basic maintenance parts." Friday afternoon, the layoff announcement hit local news. 300 workers at Whitfield Industries, effective in 2 weeks. Plant closure possible by year-end unless new major contracts materialized. Union representatives expressed concern about severance packages and retraining programs. I watched the coverage from Murphy's Diner, the same booth where I'd sat the morning after Preston fired me. The waitress, Mary, had worked there 20 years and knew half the plant workers by name. "Shame about Whitfield," she said, refilling my coffee. "My nephew Alan works maintenance there. Good job, decent benefits. Not sure what he'll do now. Alan Porter's a skilled maintenance supervisor. Companies like Apex are always looking for experienced people. You think they might be hiring? I know they are. Adding 150 positions for second shift expansion. Tell Alan to mention process optimization experience when he applies." That evening, Charles called one last time. "Roland, I wanted you to know that Preston's been removed from any operational role permanently. Board decision. They reviewed what happened and concluded his judgment isn't suited for manufacturing leadership. That's probably wise. He'll never work in operations again, at least not in this industry. Word travels fast about management mistakes that cost $45 million contracts. And you? I'm retiring early, taking responsibility for not supervising him properly. Should have known better than to let family relationships override business judgment. I thought about that conversation for a long time afterward. Charles Whitfield wasn't a bad man, just someone who'd let parental loyalty cloud professional decision-making. Preston had made the critical error. But Charles had created the environment where that error became possible. 6 months later, I was finishing the optimization project at Apex. Line efficiency had reached 86%, exceeding original targets. Quality ratings were industry-leading. The Midwest Automotive contract was generating steady revenue and stable employment for 450 workers across 2 shifts. Alan Porter had been hired as Apex's lead maintenance supervisor. Diana Foster joined as a production manager. Even Miguel Santos found work with the expanded union local that represented Apex workers. Good people landed on their feet because skilled manufacturing professionals are always in demand when they work for companies that respect expertise over ego. Preston Whitfield never worked in manufacturing again. Last I heard, he was selling insurance in Columbus, explaining to potential customers why their current coverage wasn't adequate for modern risks. Some lessons cost more than others, but they're usually permanent. As for me, I kept doing what I'd always done, helping companies understand that efficiency comes from respecting physical reality, not ignoring it. Machinery doesn't respond to enthusiasm or authority or impressive presentations. It responds to proper maintenance, realistic operating parameters, and systematic improvement. Same as people, really. Respect the process, support the system, and good results follow. Try to force outcomes through volume and ego, and physics teaches expensive lessons. 28 years on factory floors taught me that much, and I haven't seen anything since to change my mind. In manufacturing, like life, the loudest voice in the room is rarely the most knowledgeable. Real power belongs to those who understand the systems that actually keep things running. Respect isn't something you can demand or inherit. It's something you earn by proving you understand the difference between what sounds impressive and what actually works.